And I just remember, meeting people's gazes and getting a sense of panic around, because people were like crying, people were screaming like, we got to get you to a hospital. So I'm thinking like, this must be pretty bad.
Aaron Volpatti,
let's do it.
Thank you very much for coming on the Athletes Podcast, man. Appreciate your time. I'm excited for this conversation, specifically around this book, Fighter, Defying the NHL Odds, that you came out with a couple months ago, was it?
Yeah, 55 days ago, because I had that fundraising initiative for the Burn Fund. So yes. We just ended that actually yesterday. There'll be a couple more daily things in the new year that I'm going to do with the Burn Fund. But yeah, so it's been 55 days.
Okay.
And so 2 months is...
Yeah, amazing. Congratulations. Yeah. I actually wanted to start off this conversation by saying I'm going to donate after this, just to put it towards your cause, because I think it's legit.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, what you've done is incredible. I want to maybe like tee it up and let you explain your story. It's incredible. We've been connected for a couple months now. I really wanted to get your story shared in person instead of over Zoom.
Yeah,
so I appreciate you coming.
Yeah,
I'm excited for it. Former Vancouver Canuck, Washington Capital, Vernon Viper, Brown University. What was your degree in?
Human biology.
Human biology.
Yeah.
Legit. An honor to have you here, chat with you face to face. And I just wanted to share your story, use this platform, make sure people know what you're doing, who you are, and the crazy impressive feats you've overcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. This book's been a journey, like a lot of things, I guess, so far in life. But yeah, man, it was. So maybe I'll go back to how this book came to be. So I retired from the NHL 7 and a bit years ago, and like a lot of professional athletes, you just struggle with what you're going to do next, right? I mean, I was only 30 at the time, and that identity gets taken away, and then you're like, okay, what am I now? I didn't make the kind of money like a lot of my teammates made, so I needed to find something else to do and something else to fulfill a purpose too, right? So I worked in wealth management for a few years, went through a bunch of other personal adversity and trauma after hockey, which, kind of thrust me on some of this path as well. But COVID hit. I was between jobs, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I remember sitting on this bench outside and kind of had a little bit of a meditation and a visualization, which, I mean, that's what this book is largely about, is the visualization piece. And I just kind of let my mind wander. And then I thought back to this book it's always been a side project.
Okay.
My buddies that were in the trenches with me coming back from this burn injury, they were always like, man, when are you going to write a book? Like, you need to tell this story. And it was always a side project, because a big part of me was, like, as a man, especially in hockey, you're not taught to be super open and vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a nice little thought or side project, but I didn't really entertain it totally, because truthfully, it was scary to like think about just laying it out there.
Right.
But I was searching for that next thing. And so I had this moment, I'm like, all right, it's time. I can help people with this at the end of the day. Yeah. And no one really knew the true story, which was another part of it, right? So that was, a couple years ago now, or even more than that, when I'm like, all right, I'm going to start writing it. And so fast forward, it was released October 25th this year. Did a little bit of a North American book tour, which was really cool, hitting all the spots I played. We actually have one in Kelowna coming up here in a couple weeks on January 6th. Nice. And then in Winnipeg on the 21st. So once I hit Winnipeg, I'll hit everywhere I've played.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's been cool. It brings you back into the game a little bit, and you reconnect with people, in all these teams that I knew and some different friends. And so it's been cool. The response has been really amazing. And it's definitely having that impact, I think, from the messages I'm getting and the feedback. So it's been crazy. We're on a little bit of a holiday break, I guess you could say, with the book tour and the book launch, but it's going to pick back up again here in the new year. So
yeah, some of the testimonials that you have about this book are phenomenal. And I'm going to read a couple here, because I think the audience will appreciate it. Kevin BX, a former Vancouver Canuck, your teammate, said is the ultimate portrayal of perseverance, determination, and mental strength. Most teammates never knew of Patty's struggles, but nothing he has accomplished would ever come as a surprise. Sammy Joe Small says Aaron's book will leave a lasting impact on your soul. And Tom Wilson, Patty's work ethic, leadership, and perseverance came as no surprise, especially after reading Fighter. I mean, those are three individuals who have spoken. You have other testimonials on your website, but obviously has made a huge impact. You yourself said it. You were scared to write this because as a man, we're not supposed to share our feelings.
Right.
What was scarier, going through that whole experience, recovering from the burns, or actually writing this? Because I'm sure that brought up some emotions from a couple of decades previously, having to write out what actually occurred and share that story.
Yeah, this was very therapeutic. I don't think I realized how therapeutic it would be going and actually unpacking that. I mean, when it happened, it was just like I just put my head down and became obsessed. And I mean, the mindset and the visualization was a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. But I always tell people that there's lots of different types of adversity. So with this burn injury, I learned how to harness and push through like the physical and mental adversity. Mm-hmm. After hockey, it was all emotional and spiritual adversity. They're very different.
Yeah.
And so I thought, like I had all this grit for sure, and I just thought I could handle anything, but life after hockey was arguably harder from the emotional spiritual side. And I was just like a young boy with that, so I didn't know how to deal with that stuff. Right. And going through this really helped me come to that realization where, and I can reflect back now and realize that was the case. And yeah, it's very different types of adversity, but I mean, to your point with the testimonials and things like that, it's been really cool to see the impact, right? And it paid off to get vulnerable and talk about it, because we all have shit, right? And I think people relate to that, and not allowed isn't the right word, but we're encouraged to talk about it more, which is really good and needed.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that there are more individuals speaking about this? Obviously, like, have you noticed a difference now, having come out, that other people are sharing their stories as well? People will reach out to me and say, hey, I reached my low point whenever, and your story really hit home with me, right? And I've come out the other side, so I really resonate with this. I still think, we have a long way to go in the world now. And I mean, I just saw that thing, that young kid that committed suicide like a couple days ago. Yeah, and it's just London Knights.
Yeah. So, I mean, heartbreaking story. And I just think like these things around mental health, they're not going to go away. Mm-hmm. It's more like, how can we provide a world where people are okay to talk about it? And so we have a long ways to go. I also think that kids grow up in a totally different world than what we grew up in, right? I don't know. I deal with athletes now with like performance anxiety, confidence issues from like a young age.
8-10 years old, because they've been grinding for the past 3 years. Like, it's a full-time job.
Right. Totally. Yeah. That's a whole other conversation we could definitely talk about too. But I remember when I first started doing this and parents were reaching out to me about their 10, 11, whatever year old, and at first I'm like, at that age, I was just a kid.
Right.
And it's just the world now with different pressures and social media and whatever. It's a hard world for these kids. And if they don't have the tools, I think it's just going to be perpetuated, some of these problems. So I think having stories and talking about it and having different techniques or things that can help, right? That's really what we're trying to do, I think. So
yeah, and that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is so that those 10-year-olds could listen to someone like you who's gone through it and been like, hey, it's not all glitz and glam. Yeah, there's hardships along the way, but if you put your head down, if you do work, if you visualize what you could accomplish, you can absolutely get there. What were you, 12, 13, 14, playing house hockey in Revelstoke?
Yeah.
And you make the NHL. right? Played 114 games.
Yeah.
We're an impact player on a Stanley Cup contending team. We can get into that Vancouver riot that I heard about for the last decade.
Well, Spencer Chara just released those comments, which is stirring up the whole world.
I know. I was going to say, like, yo, I didn't actually see what BX said after, but that definitely probably wasn't happening over practice, hey?
No. Yeah, no. I think BX had said it well.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, let alone all the media that was around, you can't go pick your nose in a corner without someone seeing that at that time of year in the finals.
Right.
So if that would have ever happened, it would have got leaked or someone would have seen it.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I think he said it well, where like that was more an attack on the character, I think, because he said it, there's no way any of us would have let that happen. Right. So
guys like the Sedins, Kessler, Bieksa, like that core.
Totally.
I grew up watching Vancouver. I was like cheering them on, you guys on at that time. Obviously, the riots occurred afterwards. I know you got a fun story about like having to get shuttled after that game. You almost played in it.
Yeah.
What was that core like? The character, maybe that story. Cue it up.
Yeah, that was. I mean, talk about a spoiled first year. My first pro year. That was my first year. I was up and down. I think I played 15 games in the regular season, and then came up for the playoffs. I mean, I think that's arguably the best team they've ever had, the Canucks.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So that was a deep, deep team, and the culture there was awesome. The guys were great. The leadership group was awesome, like Bieksa, Sedins, Luongo, Kessler, all these guys, Ham, Hughes, Burrows, like just a great group of guys. But yeah, so cracked the roster, got my first taste on a really good team, which was, I mean, it's always fun when you're winning, right? Sure. And the city, I think we won the President's Trophy that year. So,
Corey Schneider and Luongo both put up like ridiculous numbers.
And the city was buzzing, and it was just a cool time. But yeah, so I went down to the minors. We got knocked out in the second round. I think it was one of the longest games in AHL history. Game 7 against Hamilton. I think we lost in the 5th overtime, maybe.
With the Moose?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was crazy. Anyways, lost. And so we get black-aced, come up to the Canucks. And so I didn't play any games in the playoffs, but Vigneault came into our black ace room the day before Game 7, and I can't remember who was hurt. Everyone's hurt at that time of year, right? But someone was like, they can't go. Probably had some broken bone or something. But he said, he looks at me and Alexander Balduke. He said, one of you two guys is going tomorrow. And in my head, I was like, holy shit, I might play in Game 7.
Yeah.
I might play 45 seconds total, but who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Balduke was a center, right?
Yeah, so he ended up going in. He was a center. I think probably the deciding factor was Vigneault. The thought of me taking a defensive zone draw in Game 7, he's probably like, nah. So, yeah, Balduke went in, and obviously we lost. And everyone knows what happened after, unfortunately. Yeah. But crazy time. Yeah.
So I went to school a couple of years after, and I went through a sport management degree. And that is all that gets brought up about Vancouver is like these riots, this situation. Yeah. So for 4 years of school, I had to deal with that. But you were like inside it and seeing people like dealing with those situations. I can't imagine. I mean, you've probably got some crazy stories over your years in the NHL. Any in particular that stand out? Like you talked about AV there. What was it like coaching? I know you missed Bruce Boudreau in Washington. I believe you missed, right? He was our 100th guest on the show.
Oh, was he?
But I'm always curious about coaches, how you've probably played for many throughout your years. Do you have any in particular that stand out and, really got the next best level out of you?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. I think my junior coach in Vernon, Mike Vandekamp, was a big part of instilling, that work ethic, that hate to lose mentality that I got my first taste. My coaches at Brown were obviously instrumental in giving me that opportunity to get, to this end dream of the NHL. In terms of pro, I think Vigneault was my favorite NHL coach.
Okay.
Yeah, there's this, I don't know if it still exists, but there was this, in my mind, issue where a lot of coaches, I shouldn't say a lot, I know there's some, that if you're on the fourth line, you kind of just get put, they don't give a shit almost. And where I know, like, if I was a coach, I'd go out of my way to make sure, like, hey, you're still part of the team. And Vigneault always did that, and he had that respect where he'd come to me if I wasn't playing and say, you're not playing, here's why. Where sometimes you just come to the rink and your name's on the board or it's not. And if it's not, you don't know why, right? But Vigneault would always go out of his way to come to the guys that get shuffled in and out of the lineup, right? Because, I mean, sometimes we weren't a mainstay.
Yeah.
And he'd either say, hey, we need more skill in the lineup. You're playing well. I like what you're doing. You'll be back in next game or whatever. Yeah. Or, hey, I didn't like your game the other game. I want you need to get better. And I don't like it, but at least I respect it. Yeah. And yeah, some other coaches I've had along the way, you don't get that, and you're kind of just left in the dark. Like, am I playing well? Am I not? You know what I mean? What can I do?
Yeah. Talk about that character.
Yeah, so I really respected that from AV. I mean, I could tell you tons of stories. I mean, I think the one that sticks out for me that was, I look back now and it's A, hilarious, but just, and B, like, how does this happen in the NHL when we had Oates as our coach in Washington? So he was obsessed with our sticks. Okay. Right. And he was, I mean, that was kind of the backstory on him, was he was always messing around with his stick. And I mean, hey, he's a Hall of Famer, right? He's a hell of a player. When I first went to Washington, I met the team in Winnipeg for a matinee game. Okay. And so I meet the guys like right before the game. And the first thing they do is they go look at my stick and they start laughing. And they're like, you're fucked, man. Like, and I'm thinking, like, what are these guys talking about? And they didn't say anything. They just said, oh, this should be good. This will be funny. And I'm kind of like, okay, whatever.
Nice welcome to the D room, eh?
Yeah, nice welcome to the team. So a week maybe goes by, and sure enough, we're skating around before practice one day, and Oates comes around. He's like, we got to do something about that stick. And I'm like, okay, that's what they're talking about. And I didn't think much of it. A couple more days go by, and he pulls me aside after practice, and he gets me to do this. He's like rimming a puck, and then I got to catch it, and then I either have to. He has one of the D-men come down, put pressure, or leave me, right? And I have to make a read. So I'm either chipping it off the wall, making a pass to the middle, whatever. I'm like, I make a living doing that. Like I could chip it out all day long. And so I'm doing it. I'm chipping him out well. And he's like, Oatsy comes over. He's like, no, your wrist is like all locked up. We got to do something about that curve. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Yeah. Anyways, I start talking to the guys, and I don't realize, but pretty much everyone except Ovi and Backstrom, like, heard of them, right? Everyone else is using the same curve. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, he'll like point to your mistakes and say it's because of the stick. And I'm thinking, like, I ain't switching my stick.
What?
Like, I'm trying to stay in the league at this point. The last thing I need is a new stick that I got to get used to. I mean, we're professional athletes. I'll get used to it, but like, I'm just trying to stay in the lineup. The last thing I want is just this whole new stick. Like, people craft their stick over like the course of their whole career. Yeah. So I'll mess around with the flex and the knob and things like that. But for the most part, I've used that stick for like 20 years.
So 90% of the Washington Capitals in like 2013, 14, 15 were using the same curve.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was the Stamkos curve because Oates had been an assistant with the Lightning. Hey, it's obviously a great stick, a great curve. I got nothing against that. Yeah. And Stamkos also, like, I'm not Stamkos. Yeah. I wish I was.
Neither, right? No one else is other than him.
Anyways, I'll try and keep it short, but I said no, I am not switching my stick. I'm trying to stay in the league. Yeah. I didn't go out and say no. I just didn't switch. And another week goes by, and I come to the rink one day, and all my sticks are gone out of the stall. And I got 5 Ribeiro sticks in my stall with his like name Sharpied out on the stick and my number above it. And I'm like, someone took my sticks. What? And I didn't have a choice. I'm like, well, I could just like go into his office and be like, what the hell are you doing, man? Yeah. But I'm like, I can't afford to get healthy scratched anymore. I'm trying to get another contract here. So yeah, I ended up switching my stick reluctantly, but did. Got used to it.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it was
afterwards?
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I got used to
Yeah,
it, and it's
like
a
you
good.
said, you're a pro hockey player. You can deal with it.
But that was that first game with that stick. I mean, again, I'm trying to stay in the lineup, and now I'm just like trying to use a new stick. But that's people are always like, what? So that's an interesting story.
D-man, forwards, everyone. Same curve.
Yeah, I would say probably 90% of the team
That's
is using the
insane.
same curve. It's crazy, man.
I can't even wrap my head.
I
I'm
remember-
a goalie, so I like never had to deal with that.
Yeah,
But,
I remember talking to my line mates about it, and they're like, and I remember talking to Jay Beagle. He's like, you need to change, man. You ain't gonna play. I'm like, what are you talking about?
That's insane.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Bet you didn't think that was going to happen when you were growing up.
That's what I mean. I'm like, in the NHL, that's happening, right?
Yeah.
I can see junior. I mean, I remember in junior A, like, we had to use wood sticks. That was when One Pieces came out.
Whoa.
Right? And the coach is like, hey, you fourth liners, you use wood sticks. So that's different, right?
Yeah.
But anyways.
Is that so it was a little heavier? Made sure if you slashed it left a mark.
Right. It's like, I don't want you thinking you're a goal scorer now. I need you using that for the other purpose it has. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let's talk more about your story, because it's crazy. Like Revelstoke, growing up, like you said, you were, I don't, lack of a better term, a fighter growing up. That's how you made junior A, BCHL.
Yeah.
And then continued on there, got to Brown. But during that, you have this burn experience. Like, can you maybe take us through from 14? Because I think that's the age that you kind of hint at as to when you should start taking things seriously for younger athletes. So maybe let's start there about how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, right around that time, I made this decision. I'm like, or I guess my dream was I want to play in the NCAA.
Yeah.
That was my NHL.
Yeah.
Right. I was playing house hockey. I was good. I was above average minor hockey player, but got cut from lots of select teams and all that stuff. Right. So I didn't want to be maybe naive at the time to think I could go play pro hockey because I wasn't that good. They weren't recruiting, especially to the NCAA fighters. Mm-hmm. But that's how I got into junior, was fighting. I mean, I could always hit and skate, but from that came the fighting. Mm-hmm. And the game was a lot different back then, obviously.
Yeah, BCHL especially.
Yeah, it was a mean, tough league, right? And so, I had to go back to, or really, I guess, embrace the fighting role to make it into junior A. And I snuck in as a fighter. Yeah. I mean, I had 1 goal my first year junior, and I might have had 20 fights, right? That was my job. And so for me, I had to do that to stay there. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I added in a few layers to my game the next year, did some penalty killing, played on the third line. I maybe put up 20 points in 60 games. So nothing crazy, nothing that the NCAA is coming to knock on your door and say, hey, we want you. Like, no. But in my head, I was like, okay, by my third year, if I added a few more layers, and Vernon, we were like number 1 in Canada. Mm-hmm. So we had a hell of a team, which didn't hurt either. I was confident that I could get, maybe it was Div 3, but I'm
didn't
like,
matter.
If I can get just a scholarship, that'd be sweet.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, after my second year in Vernon, we lose to the Surrey Eagles in the finals. Yeah, they had a hell of a team. It was probably the meanest hockey I've ever been a part of.
Really? What year was that?
05.
That's okay. I'm trying. I like the staple is Scotty Gomez when he played there a couple.
Yeah, he would have been like.
He's like 01.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years before that.
Okay.
Really good team, but it was nasty, man.
Really?
Like it was like slap shot.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
You like the South Surrey Arena there? That's where we grew up playing.
I did.
Olympic size ice.
That screwed us.
Right.
They just picked us apart on that ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then we were playing in the Civic old. So we went to the small. So the Civic was like, what's the hockey rink? 200 by 80?
Yeah.
Or something like that?
180. Yeah. 80 by 200. Yeah. I think it's something
the Civic is like 70 by 180. Like it's tiny. Okay. So we went from there to the Olympic size ice. And they just picked us apart. But anyways, so this ends, and back then we would do our week-long bender. I don't know what the kids do now, but back then we just partied for a week, and it was the send-off to the season and kick off the summer and say bye to your buddies kind of thing, right? So this is where the meat of the story happens, or where the journey really started. I was always I thought I was invincible, like maybe a lot of young kids, and I was the daredevil. If people said jump, I'd say how high, and I'd take it a step further. And yeah, you just think you're untouchable at that age, right? And I mean, reflecting back now, I think a lot of that was just me feeding a young ego. I like the attention. Like
the same as the fighter, right? You're trying to
right.
emulate that off the ice.
Well, and living up to that stereotype, right? As the fighter, the crazy guy. So yeah, that was a big part of it. And I was a pyro, so I was always messing around with gas and fire. So the year before, I was basically making my spin off a Molotov cocktail and filling up beer bottles full of gas and blowing them up, basically. So the next year, everyone's asked me, like, you going to do your fire show? I'm like, damn right, so I'm going to do the fire show. And so in my head, I'm thinking, how can I make this bigger and better? So I'm like, more gas. So I was filling up like wine bottles and Colt 45 bottles. Again, not smart, but you know, I was feeding that ego, living up to that stereotype and just doing stupid shit for attention and adrenaline. And so we're way out in the bush, 30 minutes out of town, no service. And I'm going around the party. We have our whole team and however many other people there, right, around this bonfire. And I'm going to blow these things up and it's going to be sweet in my head. And I'm around the party. All of a sudden, I'm soaking wet. So I had 2 bottles of wine full of gas in my sweater pocket. And all of a sudden, I'm soaking wet. So the bottoms had hit. And now I have 1.5 liters of gas spilled on my torso. And I don't know how long passed, probably like 5 minutes or so. And I just remember we'd obviously been drinking. And I just remember thinking, you know, I got to get this sweater off. I reek like gas. But I know there's a fire there and I know I have gas on myself. I just didn't respect the dangers of gasoline and the vapors that settle around you. So I was just a walking bomb. And I don't know if I didn't want to just litter and leave my sweater there, or I might have thought, hey, I might as well just light this sweater on fire or whatever and burn it. And I thought I kept what was a safe distance away and threw it towards the fire and kicked the ground kind of like this. And I went. And yeah, unfortunately, that fight or flight kicked in and I just bolted. And it was the worst thing I could have done because I was pretty fast, so no one could catch me. Right. And yeah, I was on fire and just running through the woods. And that's where this whole journey started. Yeah.
Which led to 40% of your body being covered by 3rd degree. Am I correct in saying that?
Second degree was 40%.
Second
yeah.
degree.
So we didn't know that until a few days later. So I finally get tackled from behind out in the bush, and obviously there's a lot of damage done. I had nothing left in my clothes. I remember sitting on a cooler. I was in complete shock and no pain, right? Just from, you know, something like a situation like that shock takes over. And I just remember, you know, meeting people's gazes and getting a sense of panic around, because people were like crying, people were screaming like, we got to get you to a hospital. So I'm thinking like, this must be pretty bad. And I remember looking down, and that's when I realized that I had done some pretty serious damage. And thankfully, one of the guy's girlfriends wasn't drinking, so I piled in her car, again, not in any pain yet, and we sped off to the hospital because we couldn't call 911, right?
No service.
No service. So we drive to the hospital, and about 10 minutes or so into that, that's when the shock started wearing off, and that's like pain I hope no one has to experience. Those burn injuries are, yeah, it's like nothing else. And anyways, so we finally get to the hospital. I try and paint a picture. Like, imagine the emergency room at time 1, 2 in the morning.
Got some wahoos.
Yeah. I always say you probably got your guy that got beat up at the bar and he needs some stitches. He might have a screaming baby, and someone might have chest pains or a cold or whatever. And in comes this totally naked. I'm filthy because there's just dirt up there. I'm bleeding, I'm burnt, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And I can just imagine everyone was like,
yeah, he's
you
next.
can help that guy.
Yeah. I'll hold my hip for a second here.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's when everything went dark, and they must have knocked me right out after assessing, the state of my situation. So I woke up in Vancouver the next day. So I got airlifted a couple hours. By the time I went to Vancouver, I was in a helicopter to Vancouver and woke up there the next day. And the first few days were pretty foggy. I don't remember a lot.
Yeah.
But at the time, so going back to the 40%, no one really knew. They just knew it was bad. I mean, I'm in the burn unit. I think at the time there were 10 beds there. So that's the 10 worst burns in the province. So we know it's bad.
Yeah.
But until they get like a look, so they have to do this procedure called debridement, which is basically torture. And they just basically skin you alive and keep those sites fresh for the eventual skin graft, right? So until I had that first procedure done, they're like, we don't really know. We're just trying to keep you stable right now and manage pain. So once I came out of that debridement procedure, that's when the doctor said, you're lucky, A, to be alive, and you're going to make a full recovery. It's going to be a very long road, but you'll make a full recovery, and your 40% second, third degree burns, we're going to need to graft a lot of your torso, your legs. And at the time they thought I might lose function in my right hand and arm. So I had my arms in a cooler full of ice, and thank God, because that saved my right hand and arm.
Wow.
Because that was the first thing that started hurting was my arm.
Okay.
Those third degree burns you don't feel.
No, yeah.
Right? There's nothing left. Yeah. So, and that was when, that's when I realized, okay, this is what I'm up against. So, I mean, to go further into the story, in my head at that moment, this is day 2 or 3, I'm thinking like I have camp in 3.5 months, right? And going back further and, before that, like I was just trying to get to the NCAA and I hadn't talked to any of these scouts yet. Right. So I'm like, again, if I can just add these layers in my last year of eligibility, I'm like, I think I could get a scholarship. So I asked the doctor, I'm like, I have camp in 3.5 months. And it's a look I'll never forget. And he kind of just froze. And he was like, it was a look of, this poor kid thinks he's going to be playing hockey in a few months. And he kind of sat down next to my bed. He's like, listen, these recoveries take years, not months. Like, you're going to be in here for a while and it's going to be a long road. Let's just focus on pain management and, getting you through this next few weeks kind of thing. And so my career was over at that time. Right. And I had to succumb to that at the moment anyways.
Yeah.
Right? So
I appreciate you sharing first off, because I know it's probably not an easy thing to recall. I don't know whether you know it or not. My dad's a captain for White Rock Fire Department.
I remember you said that. Yeah.
So he was working with the burn unit for 17 years. I think he was helping out the charity from there. So not the first person I've heard tell a traumatic story, but part of the reason why I wanted to share this one here, talk with you live, is just the impact that had on you, and like for you to be able to now send 40% of your book sales to the burn unit is incredible. Like, I maybe touch on like how, I mean, that burn unit is what led to you being able to continue pursuing your dream, right?
I tell everyone that there's no way I make the NHL without this injury, because it unlocked this superpower and made me realize like how powerful the mind is and this practice of visualization. Right. And so that's where kind of the story goes from there. Those first 2 weeks, my career's over and I'm just trying to focus on dealing with the pain mostly. And that's all I'm doing. I'm bedridden. I'm wrapped like a mummy and I can't move. And I get a call 2 weeks into my stay from my coach in Vernon. And he said, hey, I've just talking to the assistant coach from Brown University, and they told me that they need a guy to put the fear of God in the defenseman of the Ivy League. And my coach is like, I have the perfect guy for you. There's one major problem. He's in the burn unit and the future doesn't look great. So my coach relays this to me. He's like, they want to talk to you. Just call him. He's like, I know you got the time. So my parents take down the number. Because you got to remember, I have no use of anything. I'm just wrapped like this. So they take the number down, put the phone to my ear. I talked to this coach from Brown, and it was left very open-ended. And there's, sorry to hear what happened. We wish you the best in recovery. And that was kind of it. And I just remember they hung up the phone, and I started getting emotional because I, again, thought like, I've worked my whole life to just talk to one of these guys, and finally I have that opportunity, and look where I am, look what I've done to myself. And that's when I just started asking all these questions. I started asking why. So why can't I play hockey in a few months? And there was a lot of good reasons why. You know, infection was probably so your dad, you said, right? So he would have, have a good eye or pulse on a lot of this, but infection was probably the biggest. Like I had 2nd-degree burns that didn't close for a long time.
Yeah, and then you add in hockey gear that's not exactly
the last thing you want to do
thing.
is put that in hockey gear. So that was probably the biggest. I mean, the skin grafts were going to be limiting, painful. I couldn't sweat from those areas. So when you're talking about, if you're like pushing 40-50% potential grafts, I'm not quite that high because that's 2nd and 3rd-degree burns. But at the time, they don't know what degree is 3rd, 2nd. It's, so there's a lot of complications with sweating and heart rate when you're talking about that much, because you can't sweat from those 3rd-degree areas, right? Okay. So that could have complications. I had to wear a full bodysuit for 2 years. So the list just went on and on.
Yeah.
And I just remember making a decision. I'm like, those aren't good enough reasons for me. And I mean, in my head, I'm like, I'm not like all these other people that have come through here, and I don't accept this diagnosis. And I made a choice that day that I was going to go play in the NCAA, and I was going to play in 3.5 months and go to that home opener or season opener for the Vipers. And that's where people ask me, like, how did you discover visualization? And that's how, because I had made this choice. I'm like, if you're telling me it's going to hurt, it can't be worse than what I've just gone through. Yeah. I mean, that was a little bit naive thinking, but that was my mindset. And so all I could do was visualize and think, because that I was wrapped like a mummy and bedridden. I couldn't move.
Yeah. You weren't talking to NCAA coaches the whole time.
No. Yeah, exactly. And prior to that, it was mostly thinking about how much hurt mostly and dealing with the pain and this new shitty reality, or what I perceived to be my shitty reality of what my life was going to look like now without hockey.
Yeah. Because I remember, I can't even imagine you're bedridden in a burn unit for weeks, if not months. Yeah. And you're trying to then think about or not think about all these negative things coming in. And you're like, okay, how am I going to not accept the fact that I'm sitting here like this, mummified, and with the potential of not playing hockey for the rest of my life? Right. And that's where you turned it around. You just flipped a switch.
I flipped a switch, and I think there's a lot of power in making a decision and a choice. Yeah. Right. And so I made a choice, and I said I was going to go do this, and I was going to set off on this journey to come back and play hockey. And my mindset was, well, I was willing to die before giving up on it. Like, again, infection, I'll deal with it if that comes my way.
Did that ever waver? Was there ever a moment that crinkled, or ever a doubt?
That didn't waver my mindset, but I mean, you want to talk about that daily battle. Like, there were lots of days where I wanted to give up, probably every day at some point. You talk about the pain, and I mean, I had so many setbacks that summer. So I had this visualization practice. I became obsessed with making that recovery and coming back to play that summer. But I had every reason to quit. I mean, aside from the pain and all these reasons the doctor said why I couldn't play, like very good reasons. Like, I had kidney stones the day after I got out of the burn unit. I had to get an appendectomy a week before camp. So, like, I was pushing my body way more than it was ready for, because I had the mindset, but my body was fighting back. It was begging me to stop. It's like, hey, we're trying to heal from a major grafting surgery that you just got done, and you're out here trying to, I mean, I couldn't even walk for another 6 weeks after the hospital. So I'm like doing anything I can. Right. And anyways, they had to cut through my graft to get my appendix out. So, like, again, I had all these reasons to quit. And I wanted to quit a lot of the times, but I would always, anytime I would just close my eyes and just visualize almost like this movie I had created and where I was going. And it would always just transport me there and push me through. Again, that mindset to, I'm willing to die before I give up, at least. Right.
Is that from your parents, or like, did they instill some of that in you?
Yeah. I think for sure a little bit was, I think I was predisposed to maybe a little bit more grit
Okay.
than maybe someone else.
Yeah.
But it really came down to that. I had such a strong purpose behind the journey, and I think that's important. Like, why are you doing this podcast? Why are we talking? Like, what's the dream here, right? What's the end target? And for me, I was so obsessed with becoming an NCAA athlete and getting that scholarship that I didn't care what you put in front of me, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't guarantee I was going to do it, but I was going to see it through and push through until, again, you better cut my legs off or kill me before I stop.
Yeah.
And again, my body fought back with me doing that, but for me, the visualization piece was so huge.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me to, again, paint this picture and have this experience with this movie, and instilled like a deep sense of belief and trust in that journey. And yeah, I was able to push through all this adversity because of it. So
The first time I learned about visualization was golfing.
yeah,
Probably like 12, 13, 14 years, maybe 15. Anyway, coach is telling me, like, just think about, like, imagine what that shot's going to do and then try and do it. And usually it would, like, work out. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, but didn't really think anything of it.
Right.
Didn't imagine. I was like, 15, 16. Like you said, you're just ego-driven trying to hit the ball farther.
yeah.
10 years down the road, I'm like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. And there's a reason why it worked. For you, what were those 3.5 months looking like before that day when you strapped on the gear and actually played after that? Like, were you just thinking about getting on that ice, stepping out there, putting on your gear? What was the visualization, if you could walk us through?
Yeah. So in the burn unit, I visualized 4 things. And again, I had lots of time, so I would just close my eyes and constantly just think about these things. And the first was healing. So I would visualize myself healing from a cellular level, because I knew, I'm like, I got to get out of here way sooner than they're telling me if I'm going to play. So that was the first thing, is like, I need to heal. And so I reframed the pain, and I started visualizing the pain as like fuel for my body. And I'd visualize those 3rd degree areas shrinking and just my skin getting healthier and healthier. And it's crazy, because not long after, the pain it became more manageable.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it wasn't still there.
For sure.
Right. But it just became more manageable. And then I'm like, wow, this is like really working, and it just fed that. The second thing I visualized was walking out of the hospital.
Okay.
I didn't end up walking out of the hospital. I got wheelchaired out of there, but I still went through.
You put it out into the ethos. It worked.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't matter how. I still went through.
There's no pictures on the scorecard, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd paint that picture, and I'd feel the emotion with just, again, like proving people wrong, a lot of it. And I knew I could do that. So it's kind of sitting in that feeling of, you're right, you can do anything you want. And then the other things I would visualize is dressing for the home opener, or the season opener, which was the home opener that fall after camp. And again, like feeling the emotion of, I wasn't supposed to be playing then. So I would just create this experience. Like, what does that look like? Who's there? What do I hear? What do I feel? And then the last thing was that commitment letter to Brown. So I would just imagine like signing that commitment letter. I'd see the ink, I'd feel the pen, and I'd just, again, live in this other reality, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And just do that all day. So those were the 4 things I visualized. So for me, the visualization piece wasn't, at the time, it wasn't necessarily performance based. Like this was a recovery based practice.
Yeah.
That's how it started for me. And then when I did it, I was like, holy shit, like,
Look what I just did.
that was crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like I could do anything.
No doubt.
Right? So I, translated that into the performance aspect after that, but it took a while.
Yeah.
Like when I went to Brown, I mean, that's fast forwarding a little bit, but like my perspective on life had changed. And that was also, again, my NHL. I didn't think or have the wherewithal at 21 years old to think like, hey, if I can do that, what else could I do? I just, I was just naive, and I'm like, I'm just going to go have fun. And I worked my ass off, but, yeah, that was it for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't think what else was next at the time.
It's crazy. I bet your history wasn't written out and put on your application to Brown about what had occurred recently.
Right. That's a good question.
Like
I can't
Ivy
remember.
League, do you think they knew about that? Like, well, they must have. The coach knew.
The coaches knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think maybe not.
Admin probably didn't. Yeah.
Like, how does that end up? Like, you tell that story, zoom out, tell that story of, back in after the drinking party, whatever, and then you end up going to Brown, Ivy League. Like, I bet you most people aren't putting those two and two together.
So probably, wait, you admitted this guy that blew himself up from drinking at a party? They would have been like, huh?
Yeah, we wanted someone to instill the fear of God into the D-men in the Ivy League.
Yeah, we don't want this guy at Brown. No, you're probably right. It'd be funny to, like, behind closed doors, like, let them know in on that.
hey, doesn't matter, right?
No, it doesn't matter now. Yeah.
What was that transition from BCHL to NCAA? Like you said, you're still a young boy at the time, really. In your early 20s.
Yeah.
But you've seen a lot of shit, dealt with a lot of stuff. Did that make the transition to NCAA easier, maybe, because of everything you dealt with as a younger adult?
I felt, dealing with any adversity after that, I definitely was able to reframe it differently and tackle it maybe in a better way. But in terms of the hockey, so now you've jumped up a level, and those are now all the best players in North America. I mean, sometimes maybe more now over the world potentially. And for me, I wasn't that, right? I mean, I had this role and I could play that role, but you can't fight in college.
Right.
So for me, I had to go back to, okay, what do I know? And that's skating and hitting. So this is a bit of a funny story about my first couple months as a freshman. But so I get there and I'm like, holy shit, everyone is really good.
Okay.
And I am not, there's 30 guys on our college roster. So I'm thinking, like, how the hell am I going to crack this lineup? I see, like, some of the guys in my class who are recruited ahead of me, and they're much better skill-wise than me. So I'm like, all right, I got to go back to my roots here and just start killing everyone. And just, respectful, but again,
you're on
like,
the ice.
Yeah, it's healthy competition. Yep. Right? So once our captain's practices end and, we go into camp, I start playing hard and I start hitting guys. And next thing you know, we have a couple guys out of the season hadn't started, but they're out. They're hurt. And we have our brown-white scrimmage. And I'll never forget, one of the seniors was coming around the net and I'm back checking and he hit his head down and I buried this guy so hard. His cage actually indented and split him open for like a lot of stitches, like 40-something stitches.
Like that Reeves against Roenick hit that just happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So imagine, but the cage came in, hit him, split him wide open. I don't like to advocate for hurting anyone, obviously, but
it's part of the game, though.
But it was part of the game. My mindset was like, get out of my way. Like, I'm on a mission here, and you just happen to be collateral damage. Like, was my mindset. And he ended up quitting. He just quit hockey the next day.
Whoa.
So my coach pulled me in after that, and he was like, what the hell are you doing? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I like how hard you're playing, but we're not going to have a team left if you keep hurting everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Coach, I'm like, everyone's really good. I'm just trying to get in the starting lineup here for opening night. He's like, you're going to be in the starting lineup. Don't worry. I was like, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And so I toned it down after that. But my first college game was against Cornell at home. My first shift, I got a 4-minute charging penalty. Didn't even hit the guy. I missed the guy. And still got a 4-minute charging penalty. And whatever, go to the box, come out. My second shift, I get a 5-minute hitting from behind penalty. And we lose the game. And obviously those penalties didn't help.
Yeah.
And I didn't play for probably 2 months after that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So your first game as a freshman, and you got 9 minutes of penalties, and that was it for 2 months.
Didn't play again for a long time until right before Christmas. So maybe 6 weeks, I guess. But yeah.
And then he
sent a message like, you can't play like this.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to play hard. That's why we brought you in here, but I can't single-handedly lose us the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I was like, message received. But I mean, in those 6 weeks, I was kind of like, well, hockey isn't going to work out. At least I'm at Brown. They can't take away my education right in the Ivy League. So I was just trying to stay patient. I'm like, hopefully I get back in. But I was like, I really tainted my college career here with that first game.
Were you walking? Were you skating around a little gingerly after that? You like on eggshells, or did you come back the same way? Because that's the type of play you got to bring.
No,
right?
I didn't. I wasn't walking around eggshells. I knew I had to be smarter.
Yeah.
And so, and I was, and I had to pick my spots better, right? They brought me in for that, but not to just first 2 shifts.
Yeah. So that was when you knew you were making the starting roster. That's when your coach in NCAA did that. When you knocked out Brad Winchester, I'm sure after that fight, you kind of knew that you were going to make the starting roster for the Canucks. Any other like pivotal moments in your career that you can look back and you're like, that right there was the reason that this happened, or like, you know, outside of those 2 that I'm trying to think of?
Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, for me, everything I've achieved has always come with either some adversity and some of those moments, like you said, where there's like a very defining moment, and the burn was one, the phone call in the hospital was another, and then at Brown, I had another moment like that where the coach actually he came up to me. He's like, "You ever thought about playing pro hockey?" I was 24, and I was just finished my junior year, and I said no, never thought about it. And I went home that night, and I was like, "Man, if I can do that, why can't I go play in the NHL?" And so that was another moment where I made a choice, and I went back to the visualization, becoming obsessed, and you know, within 6 to 8 months was probably one of the top 5 NCAA free agents. So it was just crazy. And then through pro hockey, there was a few. That was definitely one of them, the Winchester fight, because that was after my first year. So we had just lost in the finals, and we needed to get tougher, right? That was a consensus.
Yeah.
And I remember we brought in guys like Owen Nolan, Todd Fedoruk, like Mike Duco, Victor Reskovic. Like there was all these guys bidding for 1 or maybe 2 spots on the 4th line. So I was kind of like, I thought the spot was mine. Now I'm not maybe totally sure. So it was basically I wouldn't call it a fighting tryout, but they're like, we want to see toughness.
Yeah.
And so after that game, I called it like another one of the double homicides where I knocked out, I think it was Demers with a hit earlier in the game. Clean hit, popped him, and then I think he didn't come back to play, but he went off. And then Winchester challenged me, and he kind of like he reached out to grab me, and I was kind of like, he sprinted at me, and I was like, whoa. I remember he missed, and he left himself wide open. And I was like, I knew I made the team right there.
Yeah.
And Stan Smeal actually, who he at the time was, I think he was director of amateur scouting, so he was partly recruited me. So he kind of gave me a wink after the game, and I was like, I knew I made it.
Yeah.
And I did, So
anytime you buckle a guy's knees like that right off the drop, that's a pretty safe.
But aside from that, was like my welcome full time kind of moment.
Yeah. What was it like playing with a guy like Ovi, and like compare that to other guys like the Sedin twins? I'm curious because I feel, I don't know, like maybe different ends of the spectrum as far as like, you know, Ovi, purest goal scorer arguably ever to play the game. Sedin twins, they're out doing the gross grind 4 times a week or whatever they are. Like any comparison similarities or like any guys? I'm more so just curious, any things that stick out for those top players on those teams?
There's some similarities, but they're very different for sure. I mean, I was lucky to just play with like in 2 amazing organizations with all these like world-class talent, right? Hank and Danny, I mean, they're 2 of the best people I've ever met, and just great leaders, lead by example, all that good stuff. And same thing with the other guys on the Canucks. Like that was like we talked about, a deep team with a ton of good leadership. When I got to Washington, it was a little bit of a country club.
Okay.
Yeah, Vancouver was like very much what you would expect an NHL organization to be like. You know, we knew where we were at every time of the day, workouts, meals, video, everything. And when I got to Washington, I remember like a week went by, and I remember I went up to Ovi and I said, like, oh, do we have a workout or anything? He's like, yeah, if you want to. I'm like, what? So it was a country club. And I think when Trotz came in, he instilled that culture.
Yeah.
And then they won like a couple years later, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, you look at Ovi, I mean, isn't he like 4th all time in hits too?
Yeah, he's crazy.
So he's a beast. He's just totally on a different planet in terms of like that, his toolbox that he brings to the game. Like not many guys can skate and hit and score like that.
Bruce Boudreau said he had knees that were twice his size.
He's
Can
huge.
you confirm? Yeah.
He's huge. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he weighs now, but he was 240 pounds, like big dude.
Yeah. Flying around.
And I think that they just, you know, maybe like a lot of things, they just went the long way around, and they needed to have those times. I mean, I can't put words in their mouth, but I think maybe they thought it was just going to happen for them. It's a good league.
Yeah.
It's not just going to happen, right? And I think they needed to go through those tough times, and I lived some of that with them too, right? Where, like really, really good players. But I mean, you look at how he played on that run, he was on a different planet.
Yeah.
Right. And to see that emotion, like I loved watching those guys win the cup and just seeing that emotion, because you knew that. I don't think if you were to ask him 5 years ago, I kind of felt like it was more that country club just going through the motions. He's still scoring a bunch of goals, but I think he really emerged as a leader more, you know, maybe a year or two before that run, where he's like, all right, I'm whatever, 30 now. We better make sure this happens. Otherwise, I can't just roll the dice and see, because it's a good league.
Yeah.
So I think you saw him turn that up, and that's where I think I noticed. I wasn't in the room at that time, right? I mean, he was still a good leader, but I think he really took that to another level.
Yeah.
That was needed for them to win the cup, right? And I mean, you talk about guys like Backstrom, and they were all awesome dudes. He was more of a lead by. I found like the Swedes were more lead by example. They weren't like the rah type of guys. So Backstrom would definitely be like that.
Who are the rah guys?
Mostly the Canadian guys that I played with anyways. And the American guy. I think more North American typically.
You guys get fired up.
More fired up, I would say.
Yeah.
Actually, Ovi was a rah guy. Like he's pretty loose.
Yeah.
Which I think isn't a bad thing, right? Just, I mean, it's a hard game. It's competitive. It's not a bad thing to be loose. But you go look out, and can you do it by example too, right?
Yeah. Were there guys that you looked up to, or like tried to emulate your game as you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, my childhood guy was Pavel Bure on the Canucks. Like I was a Bure guy. Still got, my son now has that same retro jersey.
V?
Oh
Love
yeah,
it.
no, the skate. Yeah, the skate.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and I keep telling him about Pavel Bure. Like he was just, he was my guy. I think as I got older, I tried to model more like the Steve Yzerman. So he was kind of my guy. Yeah. When I was in college, first year pro, I knew who, if I was going to make it, who I would have to be like, and that was like that third, fourth line grinder. I look at guys like Malhotra on the Canucks, right? And guys that really were like really good at one thing, and you got to be able to play, but I'm like, if I can just be, I know I'm not going to make it as a goal scorer, so if I can be the best at that new age fighter grinder role, or one of the best in the world at that, then that's my ticket.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I could always skate. So, and that was when the game started changing a little bit more than the pure enforcer. Right. So now you had to be able to play, and you had to be able to skate. So I kind of had, from the time I started to 2015 when it ended, it changed a lot. Like my first year, there was like 2, maybe 3 heavies on each team. Like by 2015, those guys were pretty much gone.
Right.
And so it changed a lot.
And you probably had to fight some big rigs growing up then. If you were that guy and like 6'1", whatever, 205, you said you were 215.
Man, I was
like
fighting big dudes.
Yeah, you got an extra 30 pounds. They probably got a couple extra inches of reach. Like, any strategies there? Just hit them hard early, or?
I had to learn not to go shot for shot with some of those big guys because
yeah.
I can't remember, a few guys hit me in the helmet, and I'm like, that almost put me down. Like, if this connects with my face, I'm going to be sleeping.
Yeah.
It's funny. I almost found the taller guys easier sometimes to fight because you could kind of protect yourself, and they would just be punching down. You had to make sure you didn't get hit with an uppercut.
Yeah.
But you could surprise them a lot of the times if you came up, because you're punching up, so you're hitting here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus the smaller guys, like when I fought Tutu and Mike Brown, like those guys were bulldogs.
And they got low center of gravity.
And now they're the ones punching up, and you're just looking at a bunch of fists coming your way. So it's totally different fighting the big guys for sure, and you got to be a little more careful maybe.
Yeah.
But
I was watching some of your clips this morning, and it kind of reminded me a similar esque to Zach Ronaldo at times too.
Oh yeah,
he was a quick, smaller guy, just able to get in.
Yeah, and just throw him.
Right, like
yeah,
and just throwing your body on the line. I don't know. I respect it when guys are able to get the job done. Put it that way, right?
I don't think I fought him. Surprisingly, I'm surprised we didn't fight, but yeah, similar type of role, right? Could skate, could hit, and yeah, you fought kind of partly because of that, but just embracing that role too, right?
Yeah, good guys. Like, that's one of the things. So Luke Gazdick's also been on the show.
Oh yeah.
Zach, we haven't been able to get on, but we've chatted a bunch. And like, it's funny because I showcase the variety of athletes that we've had on from every sport, 150 plus episodes. But a reoccurring theme is like the enforcer role. The people that are actually filling those roles are not that after the game. It's when you're on the ice, right? Like you have to play that role.
Yeah.
Get the job done. That's your job. That's what you're getting paid for. But then after the ice, after the game, same guys, great guys, arguably nicer guys.
Yeah, they're mostly your humble teddy bears, right? Like, there's a few sick puppies that are just like my agent had Trevor Gillies. Like, he was a sick puppy.
Okay.
And just some guys that just love to fight.
Yeah.
And really. But most guys, we're not that off the ice. And you're it's a job. Really?
A new guy at White Rock Fire just got hired, who played for Winnipeg.
Peluso?
Yes. That's
Was
exactly.
it Peluso?
He just got hired at White Rock.
Oh, really?
Or he's on volunteer and getting, he's in probationary period.
So I got a funny story about him.
Okay.
He was my first fight with the Capitals because we played the Jets, like I told you.
Yeah.
So he was on the Jets, and it's my first game. I'm like, I should probably get in a fight. It's why they picked me up, not to score goals. And he's a big dude, tough dude.
Yep.
And I got strung out, and he just wailed on the back of my head. Clear loss for me. And I remember going to the room I needed like 30 stitches in the back of my head. Like, he just beat on me on the back of my head. So I had all these cuts, a bunch of different little cuts. And the trainers, I had known all the medical staff and the trainers because they, when I was on the Moose, I started with the Moose when the Jets weren't there. Oh. So when the Jets came back to the city, all those guys just went up to the NHL and had jobs in the NHL. So I remember I'd go to the medical room, and these guys come, and the trainer Mullet for the Jets, who was with the Moose, like I said, he's like, "What the hell are you doing fighting that guy?" And I was like, I'm just, trying to make a good first impression. He's like, "Well, I don't know if you did that, but anyways, the funny part is Peluso broke his hand over my head. So I was like, technically that means I won, right? Because I came back and he didn't. But anyways, funny story.
30 stitches. Oof.
It was 25 to 30. It was a lot.
Wow.
I had like 4 or 5 cuts in the back of the head that each 5 stitches each or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They, the firefighters just had like a big tournament at GPF up in the Lower Mainland where all the halls come together and play. White Rock Fire won it. They've got some good recruits, Peluso being one of them. In the finals, he wired a slap shot from center, and I think it took the Langley team by surprise, and they weren't too happy about
That's
it.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's anyway, this is like a full culmination, long story. I wanted to just more than anything thank you for coming on. My dad was so fired up that we were going to be chatting. He messaged me 2 months ago when you released the book about getting you on, so it's been an honor. As you know, the way we wrap up every episode is we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes. Aaron, having gone through everything that you have, I'm sure you could probably write out a list, but if there's one thing in particular you'd like to leave the next gen with, I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah, I think that adversity is inevitable and you need to go through it. I'm not advocating that you need to go play with gas and fire or anything like that, but it's not supposed to be easy. And I think, what are your tools you have in those hard times, right? And I think that's where the visualization piece especially can come in. Yeah, you got to trust the journey, and it's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah. Hey, hard times make better people. Yeah. Where can people find you on social media? Where can people find your book? Where should they be reaching out so that they
everything's just my name. So website's aaronvolpatti.com. All the social. I'm not super present on there. I'm trying to get better on the social, but it's just at Aaron Volpatti. The book's on my website or Amazon. Just go there. Yeah.
Really appreciate your time, man. Can't thank you enough for coming out here.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Appreciate it. Cool.